Hey Hermits, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to share my 2022 reading goals with you. Are you excited? I'm excited. I have to admit I've been pretty ambitious with the intentions that I've set for myself, but do you know what? I love a challenge. I'm kind of competitive with myself, so I honestly think that that's really just going to motivate me even more. So let's start with the basics. How many books do I want to read this year? Well, in 2021, I set the goal of reading 75 books in the year, and I actually ended the year with 90 read. And I'm pretty impressed with that, given that I hardly read from January to May. Like, I did read some books, but proportionately not that many. So I think 100 feels a tiny bit challenging, but actually very, very doable. So feeling really good about that. And then in terms of what I want to read, this is where things get a bit more complicated. So I'm gonna open up my reading journal where I've written all of these down so that I don't actually forget what I want to do, because this is one of the biggest struggles when it comes to setting goals, not just for reading, but generally. It's very easy to pick things that you want to do. It's not so easy to remember that that's what you said. And sometimes the reason we don't achieve our goals is simply because we've forgotten that we said we wanted to do certain things. And so having a place where you can keep all of those things handy is a game changer. Hence, reading journal. Let's have a little look at what we have going on here. So I have written a list of 22 books, like specific books that I want to read in 2022, and that is actually in a separate video which I will link to, because I believe that one has already gone up at this point, so I will share that video with you. So I'm not going to go into those right now, but what I do want to share are some of the other bits and pieces. So I said that I want to read 100 books. And at the same time, I want to try and challenge myself to read every single day. And this is where I've fallen down often in the past, because I'll go through phases of not reading at all, and then phases of reading obsessively. And what that does is it allows me to live this life of book slumps and like fits of sleepless nights, and that's not the healthiest way to live a reading life, because I do love reading. It is a great source of comfort and relaxation for me, so it's something that I want to sustain all year round. So I've set the goal that I want to read at least 10 pages every single day, and we all know 10 pages is nothing. So even when I'm having a slumpy moment, I can read 10 pages. So that's like the minimum of what I want to do every single day, 10 pages. So then we have this one's a good one. This one's really going to test me. So I want to read 3 books in Spanish. So what you may not know about me is that I actually spent a lot of my teenage years in Spain. So my family moved over there when I was 12, and I came back to England when I was 17. And during that time, I went to high school in Spain with nary a grasp on the Spanish language. I had to learn it while I was there. And I was pretty fluent, because obviously I did my high school education in Spanish. But since moving back, I have definitely let it slide. I haven't really worked on keeping hold of my Spanish, so I do feel like it's a lot shakier now. Like when I have conversations with people in Spanish, I don't feel as confident. And that is something that I want to change. So this year I'm challenging myself to read 3 books in Spanish, and I want to have those be specifically books that were written in Spanish, not things that have been translated into Spanish. So I feel like that must be doable. It must be doable, but I know it is going to be a little bit tricky, because I've always found that reading in Spanish, I just move a little bit slower. So books can take me a lot longer to read, and obviously like some of the language can be quite difficult if you're not a native speaker. So that's one of my like top most like difficult challenges for this year. And like, just a side note, it's really hard to find foreign language books in the UK. Like, I've gone to all of my usual places and I can't actually find any books in Spanish just like for sale. I think I'm gonna have to go to Amazon, but I did want to try actual like brick and mortar bookshops first, but no luck so far. And this one is, am I being petty? Maybe I'm being petty. So towards the end of last year, I set up my Storygraph account. And if you haven't used Storygraph before, it has all of these amazing like stats and roundups of information about your reading life. And you can look at like the most recent year, but you can also look at your like entire life of reading, because it does import everything from Goodreads. So if you've been updating it regularly for years, like I have, you can see all of that information in chart form. And there's this section that kind of bugged me. So in the most read authors of all time, JKR is in the top 10. And I'm like honest, I'm probably never going to not love Harry Potter, because that was such an iconic part of my childhood. And I do think that we can separate the art from the artist. But I don't want to see her name on my top authors of all time, most read authors of all time. So one of my goals for this year is to bump her off the top 10. And what that means is I'm going to have to read at least 9 books by multiple other authors to get her knocked off that table. So that is one of my intentions for 2022. Like I said, like, it could be petty. Some might say it's petty, but that's something that I want to aim towards. Another thing that I would love to do this year is to read 12 poetry collections. I don't know if you know this about me, but I actually studied English Lit and Creative Writing at university, and so I read a lot of classics and a lot of poetry while I was doing that. And after I finished my studies, it's almost like I just needed a break from both of those genres. I just needed to be away from anything that required too much brain. But recently, in the past couple of months, I've really been feeling that nudge to get back to both classics and poetry. So one thing that I want to do this year is to read 12 poetry collections. And by poetry collections, they can either be big anthologies, they can be slim volumes. I'm not going to be super specific about what that has to look like, but essentially read 12 books of poetry this year. And then in terms of things that I want to do each month, I want to read some non-fiction every month. I want to read a classic every month. And I also want to read at least one thing, definitely probably more, written by an author of colour. Non-fiction is something that I'm very all or nothing about things. So there have been some years where I've read nearly all non-fiction and no fiction, and then years where I've read all fiction and no non-fiction, and I want to bring a bit of balance back. So I'm not too fussy about reading a complete non-fiction book every single month, but I want to read some of a non-fiction book every single month. And the same goes with a classic, because some classics are huge and some of the classics that I have sitting on my shelves are mammoth. So I'm not expecting that I'm going to be reading a classic every single month, but I want to read at least a few chapters of a classic every single month. And then when it comes to reading books by author of colour, one of my intentions for 2021 was, I believe, to read, did I say 30? I think it was 30 own voices books. And what I discovered is that it can be quite challenging to track reading in terms of like LGBTQ authors or authors with different disabilities, because they're not necessarily like in their author bio. Like, you can't tell by looking at a photo of somebody if they would fall into that category, and I don't want to guess just for this like performative box ticking exercise. But at the same time, I do want to ensure that my reading is diverse and I am looking at stories from different perspectives, different cultures and all of that stuff. Not because it makes me a better human, but honestly because I enjoy that as a reader. So that is another intention, as like a monthly goal, to read at least one book by an author of colour. I think that is very, very achievable, and I will probably read more than that, but I did want to include that as something to track as well. And then last but not least, and this is a biggie, I'm saving the biggie for last, is I want to halve my physical TBR. Now I have a lot of books that I haven't read. I have a lot. I have upwards of 300 books that I haven't read. And so what I'm going to do to start the year is just go through my shelves and be brutal about the things that I have no interest in reading. So I'm going to start off the year with a big unhaul and get those numbers down a little bit, because when I say halve my physical TBR, it doesn't have to be that I read half of my TBR. It could just be that I like get rid of a lot of the books that I'm never going to read, give them away to someone else, donate them, whatever. I am obviously also going to be reading as many books as I can, but when I say halve the TBR, either method works. So I did write down how, because I went through and counted everything, but I don't know where I put that post-it. I will update you in another video, maybe in a vlog. I will mention how many, like the final tally is, but I do want to bring that down to half. So assuming we're working with about 300 books, I want to bring my physical TBR down to about 150. I don't anticipate necessarily getting all of those books read by the end of 2022, but I want to be working in that direction. So there you have it, my somewhat chaotic, fairly ambitious reading goals for 2022. I would love to hear from you in the comments. What is your main reading goal for this year? Let me know so I can cheer you on, and hit subscribe if you don't want to miss another upload, and if you want to be the first to know about me hitting all of these amazing goals that I set for myself. That's all from me today. Until next time, see you later.